The COVID-19 pandemic has caused a ton of isolation. In some ways, that's a good thing. We were taking care of ourselves. But now, isolation and loneliness has become something that really brings harm. What should we do when we're feeling lonely? Well, today, we're going to talk just about that. Welcome to Tiny Chair Talks, where we have big conversations in tiny chairs. Today, I'm here with our very special guest, Tyler States. How are you, man?
Man, I'm doing great. It's good to be here.
Awesome. I'm so glad you're here, too. So talk to me. How have you seen people experiencing loneliness throughout this crazy time?
Mercy. That's such a good question, and it's so encompassing. I could start with myself and just say that there was a time where I was looking forward, I think, to the quarantine, the lockdown period, and looking forward to some time alone and getting to just relax and be away from school. But after a while, when you're away from your friends and you're away from people that you love, it gets really hard to feel that connection and that human bond with other people that we so crave. And I think that one of the biggest places that I was able to see loneliness was working at summer camp and seeing a lot of kids being able to come out of isolation and actually be with people for the first time in a long time and see how powerful that experience was to be able to feel loved and actually even be touched by people and get to be around people other than their parents or so for such a long time.
So that's interesting. You're describing how loneliness affects people of all ages.
Mm-hmm.
You're in your 20s. You just mentioned kids in summer camp. How have you seen loneliness not have any bias?
Man, well, I think that we can just see how there's never a point where I can become old enough to feel totally surrounded and supportive of anybody. There's never an age that I can reach where I'm invincible to feeling lonely. I can hear stories and have seen stories of elderly people who have lost a loved one, and they're now back in this spot of loneliness that somebody who might be looking for a spouse or might have lost a friend in their 20s might feel. They're at the same level of loneliness, and when that connection is broken, it still hits the same.
What are some of the effects that loneliness causes on people?
I think loneliness really has a way of making us start to overthink. I think in my certain position, I believe that it sometimes makes me doubt myself, and it leads me to ask questions of what's wrong with me. If there weren't these certain things wrong with me, I wouldn't be alone, and there's certain things that I need to change in order for myself to be more attractive or to allow people to feel more at home or would like to even be with me more. I think it can really lead to a lot of self-harm in terms of just beating up yourself and talking yourself down.
Is loneliness ever a good thing?
I think some people they could benefit from a little bit of loneliness to reflect. But I think loneliness as a whole probably, I would say, isn't the best. I think we were built for community. I think that's part of our DNA. We're meant to be with people. We were not meant to be isolated.
Yeah. If you don't mind, I'd love to hear how you have dealt with loneliness in the past.
Sure, absolutely. I think something that's really interesting that I've started to really think about probably since I was in high school was the fact that you can be very popular and still lonely. It's very possible to have many people know you and have yourself know many people, and there's lots of acquaintances, but a lot of surface level relationships and friendships do not count. I would say when you're kind of you're going through a rough spot in your life and you don't really feel any support. And I think that's something that I really came to realize after I went through a pretty traumatic experience in my own life, where I was needing to lean upon people in my life who had my back, who cared about me. And I was hit with this realization that while I would consider myself a popular person who is known by many, I still felt alone. And I didn't feel like there were people that were actually there for me, who knew my present circumstances, who were willing to go beyond the fact that I was fun and just a good person to be around, and who were willing to still embrace me even though I didn't have anything to provide for them. And I think God in His goodness was able to lead me to a point where I was able to accept that I was struggling with loneliness and that I did need to start investing in others in the way that I would like to be invested in.
Man, that's really deep. Thank you for sharing that. I'm wondering, what is God's perception about loneliness? Does He care when we feel that way? What does He think?
Man, I can personally say that I haven't found a better friend than God, and I can truly say that in times of loneliness. I think when we're alone, when we're just physically alone, perhaps at night, maybe you're in the shower, you're just thinking, there's lots of thoughts running through your head. And I think I've always been able to run to God with a lot of the fears and the doubts about myself. And he's been able to really remind me that even though I may feel abandoned, I may feel ignored and alone in terms of human connection, I actually do not ever lack the presence of a friend because I have him. And he's shown me that, there's nothing that I can do. My present circumstances are never going to affect his presence in my life. And I think he truly cares, and I think God cries alongside each and every one of us as we go to him in our loneliness.
Man, that's good. How do you think God empathizes with our loneliness? Because we think of God as someone who's in heaven with a bunch of angels, with a bunch of heavenly beings. He doesn't seem lonely, but do you think he empathizes with it?
Sure, I think absolutely, and I think we can most clearly see it represented in the life of Jesus. I think Jesus was somebody who had so many followers, but he still felt terribly lonely. I think about when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane and he was asking his 3 friends to pray for him, and they weren't even able to pray for him, and he's off praying alone to his Father, and he's begging for this cup of suffering to be taken away from him. He didn't want to go through this, and he had asked for these 3 friends to come alongside him to support him, and they couldn't even be there. And I think God looked at his Son. I think that Jesus himself he's so aware of our struggles because he struggled with the exact same things.
Yeah, and that's interesting you mentioned about friendship. Jesus had his friends there, but his friends weren't really showing him the support that he needed. What should we do when we feel like our friends aren't really showing us the support that we need during those moments of loneliness?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a question that I've wondered, and I think in a sense I've tried to start to come from this place of understanding and almost patience with my friends. And I've come to this understanding that I'm good at putting on a face. I'm good at kind of just projecting that all is well and that I'm doing just fine and I'm feeling fulfilled and satisfied in life. And I can't expect my friends to always know when I'm lonely or I'm needing a word of encouragement or some support. And I can't get frustrated or feel disappointed if they're not reaching out to me, if I'm never actually reaching out to them. And I think that comes from a place of sometimes pride of not wanting to admit that I am struggling, that I legitimately feel lonely. And I think that in terms of me thinking about friends who may not be supportive or reaching out, I have to really question and ask myself if I've kind of given them an insight into my life as to what some of my certain needs might be.
Yeah, and how can you become a friend for someone who's lonely?
Sure, I think, well, first, I think I can utilize the pain that I've experienced as an empathy tool to understand other people who might be in the same position. And so with that, it's always great for me to, in periods of good times in life where I am feeling really supported, to use that momentum to pour it into people who I know may probably be struggling and say, hey, I actually do know what that person is feeling like, and so I'm going to utilize the support that I have right now and just share that with someone else. My cup is full, so let me pour into somebody else who might be empty.
Yeah, that's good. And I know you're someone who is very involved in ministry and leadership. Have you noticed that in becoming a leader, you have felt more lonely or less lonely? What could you say to other leaders?
I think there are 2 answers to that. I think one, in a way, that you do get a little bit more lonely because I think as you sometimes rise through the ranks, you kind of are elevated to the top, and then people look to you almost in a sense of being the one who needs to support everyone else. And I think it can become easier to almost be alone at the top. And I don't think that's a healthy thing. But what I've noticed is, as I have been able to become more involved in ministry, I've been surrounded by a lot of really intentional people. And I think something that I've realized is that, people's presence and the support that I receive, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. And so when before I might have been seeking to gain support from 30-something people, I'm able to gain it from 3 people now. And those 3 people are more than enough to keep me fulfilled and satisfied. I have specific friends who I can think of that I go to when I'm needing more spiritual advice, or when I'm needing emotional advice or relationship advice, all the above. And I have different people who can meet those needs.
Yeah, that's good. I love that you have people who can meet your needs.
Absolutely.
Now, some people resort to their romantic relationship as their sole source of avoiding loneliness. How have you experienced that, or what could you say to someone who's looking for that?
Mercy. If I can be brutally honest, I definitely struggle with that in a relationship, and I just ran to my significant other when I was feeling lonely. And I believe that is something that I believe all of us in romantic relationships seek to provide for the other person. We would like to be there for them and to keep them supported. It's a good thing, but that can also be very draining on the other person too. And so I think something that's important is, as a guy or as a girl, like maintain your group of friends. Maintain, if you're a guy, have your guy bros, have your girlfriends, like have those people who you can really run to, who can fill up your tank, and that way you're not having to really just draw on the resources of your significant other, because we don't want to be a burden on anybody. And I think it's really important to just really maintain our individuality and remember to do the things that you love. Remember what your hobbies are. It's great to just actually do things with other people, not just your significant other. So remember that you had friends before you were in a relationship, and I think if I can walk it back to where I am right now, I have been single for some time, and within that, God has really blessed me with He has almost forced me to have to find people outside of a significant other to meet the needs that I met before. And I think that's really been beautiful, because He's been able to surround me with a strong group of guys, a great support group from my spiritual mentors from all different sorts of life that have really blessed me in a way that I wouldn't have been able to before. So
Man.
I would say just keep your eyes open, really seek to surround yourself with people of the same sex, and just try to be positive. And don't trust your feelings all the time. Our feelings are very misleading. We're not as alone as we think.
That's powerful. I love that, man. Thank you. And I'm wondering, you are blessed with that community, your guy bros, like you said it. And I've got my community too. But how about for that person who doesn't even know where to look for people? What should they do?
Sure. I think something that was really, really practical for me was to just kind of reflect on what it was that I enjoyed doing. I've always been able to find community based off of my hobbies. And I think that's a place where I can connect with somebody who I have never actually connected with before. So if you have hobbies, see if there's an outdoor community that you can get involved in. If you love gaming, see if you can meet some gamer people and just connect on a very fun, basic level. And you might be able to make some deeper, more emotional connections based off of that. I'd say just continue to be yourself. Don't change who you are to try to fit into a friend group, to try to find friends, to make friends. Just truly be who you are. And I think first, if you can, to always try to just be a friend to others. Be the friend that you want to have in return.
That's good. And how bad is it to be lonely? Is it all right for someone to just make that decision for themselves, to not find a community, to not find a group?
I personally think in some ways it is. I think that there are times where it is very difficult, and sometimes we're dealing with mental struggles that inhibit us from being able to branch out when we even would want to. And on the flip side, I do think there are many situations, and I've even been in this situation, where I kind of was making the choice because I was too proud to reach out to people. I was too proud to just branch out, and sometimes maybe you're even a little bit shy and you don't want to just reach out and talk to somebody new. But I think overall what I've learned is that people are a lot nicer than we give them credit for. Yeah. People are kind and welcoming, and I think if we're showing interest in others, we'll have that interest back.
Yeah, that's good. And how about for the person who doesn't really know that there are kind people out there? Maybe there's someone who's been scarred, who's been hurt, who's just experienced pain after pain when it came to really connecting with someone. How can they step out of that fear and find companionship again?
I can imagine, and I'm deeply sorry for those people who have been hurt by others. And I think something that might have to happen is for us to take some time to really acknowledge some of the hurt that has taken place within us, and to admit that we might have some walls that we've built that are keeping people out, people who may even want to be joining and coming into our lives. And I think that hopefully we're able to do some reflection in terms of kind of what has hurt me in the past. And I think just giving people second chances to prove themselves, to be kind, to be honest, to be true, to be loving. I think that's what we want, is to be loved.
Yeah, that's true. I think we do all want love. How can someone find the love of God when they're experiencing loneliness?
Well, I think I've personally found the love of God most powerfully in being really honest in prayer. I think in my moments of deepest loneliness, I've really been able just to run to God and just sit there at times and just cry to Him. And I think that's such an emotional connection we can have with our God, is just to be open in our pain. And I think just being able to read different stories in the Bible and witness a God who is in pain, who actually does understand what I've gone through, and to feel that not only is He empathetic, He's sympathetic, and He loves me.
Yeah. What have you seen specifically in the Bible that has brought you hope?
Well, I think just the story of Jesus, and just how I think in the end, I feel Jesus experienced loneliness, but it wasn't permanent. I think of when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane, he was terribly lonely, and he was begging for God to take away that cup of suffering. And yet at the end of it, he was willing to say, "Thy will be done." And at the end of that, he was able to just experience such power and such victory, I think, through God's plan for his life. I don't think that God necessarily plans for pain to be present in our life, but I think loneliness and pain can lead us to his heart, and it can really do a lot of work that wouldn't be able to take place if we were feeling all content and happy all the time. And so I think it's a great way for us to be opened up to the eyes of, or our eyes can be open to some of our own struggles that need to be addressed. And I think God's really been able to show how great of a therapist he is. And I don't know, he just has great plans for all of us. I know that loneliness isn't permanent.
Oh man, that's very encouraging to hear. How about for the person who wants to experience a sense of companionship, to exit loneliness, but they've never tried God before?
Wow.
What if they've been searching for that sense of satisfaction in other places? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think it's really important to get yourself involved in a spiritual community. I've been so blessed by being able to go to church, growing all the way up. And all my years, I've always been going to church, but being able to be a part of ministries outside of that, such as Pathfinders, such as campus ministries on different campuses, being able to be part of small groups and Sabbath schools. Those are places where you can meet people who are like-minded, who do have the love of God, hopefully, in their hearts, who are willing to just invite others in. And I think that's a great place to start. I know that nobody's perfect, and there have probably been situations where people have tried that in a church setting before, and it hasn't worked out. But I would just ask, if you can, try it again and give people another chance.
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate that. For the person who is maybe feeling insecure about their own personality, like, I want to start establishing connections with folks, but I feel like I'm an awkward person, or I feel like I just don't know what to talk about when I'm with others.
Yeah.
What should they do?
Yeah. Well, first off, just embrace your awkwardness. I mean, I would consider myself a funky and an awkward person at times, but I think, thank you, Bryan. I think, though, that if you can just really come to accept, some of the things that we think of as weird, that's beauty, man. That's just a way for us to be so unique and individual. I think if we're wanting to connect with people and we don't feel like we can as much, I'd say always try to get people talking about themselves. And that's a great way, trying to get people just to open up. And if we can show interest in others, eventually interest will be shown into us as well. And I think that's a great way to build interaction and community with people, is just to actually care. Care about other people first.
That's super practical, asking people about themselves, because people, we love talking about ourselves.
Yeah, we're inherently selfish.
I think so. So that definitely helps establish those connections. Yeah. So how have you been able to, in this, moment of your life, been able to experience peace?
Peace. I would say practically, I've really been able to experience peace through journaling. I really enjoy being able to journal and just write down my thoughts. I was recently able to be at this campus ministries conference, and I think that was one of the times where I felt the most peace, and that was during a worship experience with music. I absolutely love singing and being able to be with a group of people who are just praising God. I truly haven't felt more content possibly in my life, of just being in a spot of just utter joy and just praise to God. I think praising God is always a way to combat loneliness, to combat insecurity, and that's a way that we overcome all of these negative feelings in our lives. I think just glorifying God whenever possible.
So you're saying your spiritual life affects in a positive way your emotional life and your mental state?
Directly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Can you describe that some more? Like, how did you first notice that when you were focusing on God, that everything else was having a positive effect in your life?
Well, I can't say that everything was always having a positive effect, but I think overall, as a general trend, when I'm thinking about God, I'm more comforted in terms of my present circumstances. Life is crazy, it's unpredictable, and I think we can think of life as being filled with storms, but there have been times where I've been able to think of, there are like some of these just massive trees on this earth that have gone through crazy hurricanes and crazy storms, and those trees have been able to stand so strong and firm, and it's because of the roots that they've been able to dig down that allow them to just withstand so much trial and craziness in life. And I think that's how I think of myself. I think that as I began to notice the importance of growing my roots down deep into a relationship with God, it was able to just stabilize me through many crazy circumstances, both interior and exterior. And it gives me comfort to know that God is above everything that's happened. He is above COVID. He knew it was going to happen. He's still in control. And having somebody that is in control and who has the answers even when I don't is so, so comforting.
Yeah, that's really great how there is something greater than us.
Absolutely.
Somebody who's out there and aware of all the things that we're going through.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm curious to know as well, what's the first step someone should take if they know they're experiencing loneliness?
I think almost the first step is to be really honest with yourself. That's something that I had to do. I had to just admit that I was lonely. I had to admit that I had an issue and I had a connection issue. And I needed to just ask myself some questions as to perhaps what caused these feelings, why are they here? And then I think be willing, for me personally, to get over my pride, and perhaps it won't be somebody else's issue. But I do think the first thing is just to really just be honest and accept those emotions. And we can't always trust our feelings, but we should examine them, I think, and just listen to what they're saying. And I think, honestly, I've been able to always take those feelings, these emotions of loneliness, and just lay them at the feet of Jesus in prayer, practically. Yeah.
So Tyler, is God enough to help someone in their loneliness?
I think so. I think there are times where God is absolutely enough, and I think that there are times where God is part of the solution. And I think there are many times where Jesus with skin on will show up in our lives. I think God leads people into our lives that can really help address those needs for community, those feelings of loneliness. And I think that there are times where God allows people to become part of the solution, part of His solution for certain people's loneliness. I've been able to witness both. I've been able to witness when God alone was the only person who pulled me through a season of loneliness. And maybe that was like literally a half-hour session of, just extreme, almost depression, I would say. Just feeling down and just so lonely and honesty, kind of worthlessness. And God was able to just pull me up through encouraging Bible texts, or just as I prayed to Him, He was able to be more than enough, and there was nobody else present. But at other times, God has heard my prayer, and then He has led people who weren't Him, but were people that were representing Him to me into my life, to really just comfort and guide me through those seasons, and just to remind me ultimately that I'm not alone. I'm not as alone as I believe I am.
Tyler, thank you so much. I really appreciate everything that you've shared and how vulnerable you've been with this topic.
Yeah.
It means a lot. Yeah, so I'll tell you at this moment, if you're experiencing loneliness, if you're looking for community, a place of belonging, it's out there for you, and you can especially find it in God. We want to thank you for joining Tiny Chair Talks, where we have big conversations in tiny chairs, and we invite you to continue watching these videos. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to see some more, check out any of these two right next to me.